So while we're talking about code compliance, obviously, just like all the other issues we're going to be talking about, it always comes back to project delivery as well, right? So we have design, bid, build, we have design, build, fast track, multiple prime, integrated project delivery, which I'm sort of grouping with construction manager, sort of similar in certain ways. And we're talking about code compliance issues. So we have zoning code issues, building code. We have the sort of process issues of working with inspectors and all of that. And you can start to see pretty quickly where there are going to be issues and where there's not going to be issues. We're talking about design, bid, build. Well, that's that one where you start with the whole big design process, you go through all the schematic design, design development, CDs, bidding, all of that stuff, and then you have a bid phase, and then we choose a contractor and we're building it out. So presumably all the zoning and the building code issues, all of that has been sort of taken care of during the sort of permitting phase, which would be kind of during that bidding phase, and perhaps with opportunity to do reviews at different points, depending on what kind of project it was and what sort of setup there was at the municipality that you were working in. So there's a lot of opportunity for a review before the contractor has necessarily even gotten involved. And then once the contractor is involved, now the contractor will be then in charge of all of the appropriate inspector reviews. And it's a fairly straightforward process just because it's long and drawn out. It can be a little bit daunting if you get to this design point and then the permit is bounced back because they won't allow it. There's a lot of time that has been spent there. So that's one of the reasons why, as an architect, you want to really be on top of what's actually allowed in by permit in either a zoning sense or in a building code sense, because there's always going to be little bit differences of interpretation, but you wouldn't want to be really far off, because then that can be kind of a financial disaster. So that design, bid, build has sort of built into it this opportunity, because of the way it's set up, for appropriate reviews when it comes to code compliance. Design build is a little more complicated, because the design build is happening where there's that early phase of just sort of making sure they've got the program right and all of that. But then at some point it's just sort of handed over to the design builder. And so the design builder has to decide when they're going to do their permit review. It doesn't have any other people. So there's just this one entity that's sort of doing this process. One of the advantages of the design bid build is that you have these multiple people involved, the architects and then the GCs, and so there's sort of opportunity for kind of sort of informal reviews of each other when you're doing that. When you have design build, one of the whole advantages to design build is I'm reducing all of that excess communication issues because I'm working with just one entity. Well, the downside with that is that it's just the one entity, and so you're not getting that informal kind of reviews that are maybe can help find problems from a permitting standpoint or from other code issues before they become problems. So that's potentially an issue. Fast track, that's the one that's you do the design for one package, like the foundation, that kind of thing, and then they start building it right away. And then as soon as they're doing that, you're doing the design for the structure, and then they start building that right away. And then after that, you're doing the design for the skin, and after that, they're building that right away. And the whole point is to get to a fast pace of it. You're trying to go really fast, and so there's all this overlapping of design and construction. Well, this doesn't even fit with the idea of permitting. Like you essentially can't do fast track in a normal permitting situation. So how do you do it? Well, this has to be negotiated. So anytime you see a fast track project, you know that that's going to be a negotiated setup for the zoning and the building departments. So this is all going to be that kind of special negotiations and very particular special process that they would have to go through. Because it's happening so quickly and you don't have the full information, they have to have the inspectors at each of these important milestone moments. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. You're moving so fast, and there's never a full set of drawings that has everything in it, and so they have to be kind of almost a team member in order to do that. Not every city will allow that. Not every municipality has the ability to do that. So it's something like you can't just do fast track anytime you want. You actually have to make sure that the code officials are interested enough that they're going to want to help out in that as a process. The types of projects that often go fast track tend to be fairly large projects, because you wouldn't really bother with fast track if it wasn't a big deal. Why would you take the chance if there wasn't important savings to be had or important deadlines to be met? And so typically, the local municipalities will be excited by being able to be helpful for that because they want to encourage development generally, and they want to make sure that things get developed in a safe and logical way. So you can usually do it, but it is all about the negotiation. When you start getting into some of these other ones, the sort of interesting things here is the idea of who's in charge of what issue. So we talked about how, in a design bid build, there's a very sort of clear, the architect is sort of in control of the kind of code information and reviews and all of that through that first set of phases. But then it very clearly shifts over to the GC. Once the GC is chosen, they're responsible for, getting any additional permits. They're responsible for getting any code officials on site, inspectors on site to review, is the plumbing being put in correctly? Is the foundation going to meet the code? Not every place will have intense inspectors. Some across the country, some cities will have very, very involved inspections, and other places have decided that they'd rather not spend the money on that, and what they do is they sort of decide that, well, we have professionals involved and it's their liability, so if anything goes wrong, we're just going to focus on that. You'll find differences around, but the idea of local inspectors would definitely be on the exam. And so in that design bid build example, it's very clear who's responsible. As soon as we get into something like multiple prime, well, now we potentially have more than one designer, we potentially have more than one GC, and the set of relationships over who's responsible for which part of the building or zoning code could be really kind of complicated. Imagine you're submitting a set of drawings that has two different authors on it. So it's hard enough in your own office getting the communication to work correctly. Now you have a situation where you're trying to get your own communication together aligned with another design firm so that the permits and zoning issues and building issues can all get neatly aligned and approved. In general, when you're thinking about it abstractly, most of these issues seem sort of obvious and that they sort of separate themselves out pretty easily, but there's always those things that sort of slide, well, is that really in your camp or is that in the other architect's camp? And it's hard to know, right? So that's why if a question comes up about multiple prime, it's probably about the issue of communication systems, aligning, coordinating, all of that. And if it's about the codes, would be about those issues, coordination and alignment from a code standpoint. Integrated project delivery and CM, construction managers. In those situations, the interesting thing there is that everybody's involved as a team, but only one of them is a licensed architect, right? The architecture firm is the licensed architect, but the project is sort of, for lack of a better term, under the control of the construction manager or the owner contractor type setup. And so in these situations, the architect is responsible, but is not always in the driving seat in terms of the sort of financial needs of the project. And so these ones can be a little bit complicated over who's in control over it. So again, if there's a question about that, it's going to be about the idea of coordination and communication, that the whole point of these is you have really good communication. So hopefully that's the advantage, is that you have set up a very clear communication process. That's what integrated project delivery actually means, is essentially that it's integrated communication. But that means it has to play out through a situation that is different from this original one that we were talking about, where it's very clear